Here's what's coming up on today's show.
Where is that pile of money? Is it in all pre-tax, where that pile is not all your pile? It's part of North Carolina or Virginia or IRS, right? Federal government.
Welcome to the How Money Works podcast with Craig and Jennifer Moser of Maestro Wealth Advisors, serving you throughout the Triad of North Carolina for more than 30 years.
Let's have a little fun, since we always do that anyway. Let's do the retirement game show, guys. I'm going to give you guys some game shows, classic game shows here, and I want you guys to have a little fun and do your thing and spin it into a financial lesson, or however you want to take that. So we'll have a little bit of fun with this, and we'll just jump right into The Price is Right. I mean, you can't talk about game shows without going the all-time classic, right?
Exactly.
So, I don't know, the world of stock trading, right? I mean, you want to get the price right, right? When you're buying the market, right? So talk to me about it.
Well, it depends on who you talk to. Some of the advisors that we talk to, they just say, well, if somebody's focused in on stock prices or some sort of, buy low, sell high sort of strategy, they're not really an advisor, they're a broker. But I disagree with that. We started back in the late 80s, real late 80s, like 89. And for me, that's where we started. We were, people that looked at fundamental research and that type of thing. But then the important part is, it's okay to buy something at the right price. Mm-hmm. It's okay to sell something at the right price, but you also need extensive planning. That approach is very important if you're going to work with an advisor. So I'm a CFP. I'm not ashamed of that. I did it a long time ago, and I've kept it up, and I like that trade because what it allows me to be able to do is look at the big picture. If you're just interested in I bought something and I sold it and I made a profit. God bless you. That's a good thing.
It is a good thing. You have to think about what are your investments supposed to do? They're supposed to fuel and fund something, right? A future lifestyle, an income, or a legacy. So, buying, like you said, buying right is good, but you have to understand what you're doing with that asset
right.
And how are you going to use it.
So let's talk about the right timing. So the big picture is the right time and way to take a pension. How do you maximize that for maybe 2 lives? What's the best move? The most beneficial time to take Social Security. I just, this past week, had a phone call with somebody and they were like, well, I'm going to take it now. And I'm like, if you wait this much more time, which was a very short window of time, you increase your payout a lot. And they were like, let's go check that. And by golly, I was right. Who knew? How to create an income that covers this gap. Because if you said, okay, I want $120,000 a year, and let's just make it very simple and say your Social Security was 60, where does the other 60 come from? Can you make it last as long as you do? How much does it cost to access the money? And by that I mean the tax costs to get the money out of an account. These are all things that you want to have somebody, a good financial advisor, CFP in my world, to run those numbers for you so that you've had a good hard look at it before you go into this thing.
So let's talk about another game show about this, retirement game show theme. Are you smarter than a fifth grader?
Well, my wife would say many times, negative ghostwriter, you're dumb as a stump. So.
I wouldn't say that, honey. You say that,
no,
but
you thought it though many times. So we'll come home, and she'll take another direction. And both of us are speeding and taking risks to try to beat the other.
Oh, I don't do that. I am really slow.
You liar.
So anyway, are you fast? Are you faster?
She's lying, people.
Are you faster than a fifth grader? Are you smarter than a fifth grader, Craig? Yeah. So how can we apply that to the retirement space?
I don't know if I can. Keep it simple, stupid, or whatever it is. Sort of
the KISS principle. Yeah. Keep it simple, stupid.
Meets comprehensive planning, because if you're going to retire, you've got to do some good planning. So I'm struggling with this concept of keeping it where a fifth grader can understand it. Lots of folks are not savvy when it comes to rates of return, using, for example, stocks as an example. You might have an average over 5 years of 10%, but it might be plus or minus 15%. And that's doesn't matter when you're saving. It doesn't matter while you're working. But when you retire, that variability in the outcome, each year might make the difference between success or failure. So how steady can we make that? Maybe that's the simple part, and again, coming back to things like Social Security, the easiest solution would be, okay, 62, click, the switch goes on, I get a check. Is that the best thing to do? Again, you've got to run numbers and take a look. So I don't know that a fifth grader could grab all of what we're doing, but at the end of it, we can come out with a plan and say, here's our recommendations, which we do. Here's how we would approach this.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden we hopefully can get that in a format where it's like, okay, this makes sense. Can you do this or not?
Well, let me ask you.
Part of it, real quick, Mark.
Okay, yeah.
I think part of it is knowing your audience. So some people do want to know how the clock is made, and it's important to give them that information. But some people, their eyes just gloss over and they're ready to crawl out of their skin if you get into a lot of detail.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to be a well-rounded advisor, is to know your audience and to be able to explain concepts and terms that people can understand, whatever level they're at, and basically bring them along and educate them along the way of why things are being done, and making sure that they buy into that strategy so they can maintain that strategy when their neighbor says something or the news says something or the market does something. Right?
So they don't get influences.
I'm sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say they don't get influences easily. That's a great point. I'd had an advisor tell me years ago, I don't know if you guys have ever heard this, you think about the different rules we hear, like the rule of 72 or the 4% rule or the rule of 100, so on and so forth. And he asked me if I knew what the rule of 11 was. And I was like, I don't think I've heard that one.
What is that?
And he said, if it's too complicated for you to explain your retirement plan to an 11-year-old, it's too complicated for you. And I thought, well, that was an interesting way of putting it, because it's like it needs to be simple enough that you understand it so that you will put it into practice yourself. And if you can't, translate that and tell another person about it, then maybe it's too much for you to handle. Not that saying the person was dumb, that's just that they weren't buying into it. And I thought, well, okay, it's an interesting way of putting it. So
right, if someone was going to tell me how to, change out a carburetor, I sure wouldn't want to know all the details of it. Just make it happen.
Right.
Unless you have to do it yourself, and then you're buried in YouTube.
I was going to say, then I go to YouTube, and you're like, you're on that dang phone again.
This is true. Hey, speaking of YouTube, don't forget, you guys can go check out the YouTube site for the team here. Maestro Wealth Advisors have their own YouTube channel, like everyone does now, but you can find that nice and easy. Go to maestrowealth.com. That's maestrowealth.com. Click on the links. They have a lot of good tools, tips, and resources. You can sign up for the newsletter, but you can also check out YouTube, and there's a lot of good videos on there. So
podcast.
And the podcast. That's right. You get the podcast version of the video show. How about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? You can't talk financial stuff.
Ooh, me.
Right? Right? Everybody wants to.
So, a lot of people get fixated on how big is my pile of money?
Right.
Which is always a good thing. The bigger the pile, the more choices you have. You know, sometimes it's a problem, but there's other sides to that too. So we like real estate. So we have cash flow from real estate coming in, and I like it. It's a check in the mailbox. Not really. It's check in the bank, but you know what I'm saying, mental image.
Right.
Sooner or later, we'll turn our Social Security checks on. If you're lucky enough to have a pension, good for you. If not, you might have an annuity. An annuity could say, okay, at some age, I'm going to turn this switch on and guarantee a cash flow. Cash flow is very important. We have clients that maybe don't have a big stash of money, but daggum. Like, for example, my dad had 2 pensions. He had a federal, he was a postman, and your dad too, and they both were in the National Guard. How weird is that, since she was from Kentucky? But, same thing. But they had a lot of cash flow. It wasn't just, I've got to hope that my big pile of money will last me 20 or 30 years. So you've got to look at it and do the planning and ask yourself, how do I evaluate, how much I need over and above the reliable, stable income that you have. So typically that's going to be Social Security or pension, but it could be real estate or something else, and then how am I going to get that cash flow? It's not just a withdrawal from your account. Do you want some sort of control over the outcome? It's so funny. People say, well, I have this pile of money. Surely this is going to work. And my answer is maybe it will.
It really depends. People get fixated. If I have $1 million, again, keep it simple, stupid. The previous game
show.
Me
stupid?
No. Are you smarter than a 5th grader?
Feels like it.
People aren't standard, right? So, they try to put this number, if you have $1 million, you're good in retirement. Well, not really, because someone might have a $120,000 a year lifestyle. Someone might have $75,000 a year lifestyle. Someone might retire at 70. Some might retire at 50. So to your point, Craig, it's not the pile of money that you have, that number. It's really, can you make this pile, like an engineer in Apollo 13, can you make this pile of money turn into the lifestyle in the retirement
cash flow
that you need?
I agree.
And so you've got to look at all those components that you were talking about. And also, where is that pile of money? Is it in all pre-tax, where that pile is not all your pile? It's part of North Carolina or Virginia or IRS, right? Federal government. Even though they're talking about keeping the lower tax rates for a while, hopefully that will pass, there is still a cost to having that pre-tax money versus all your money in a Roth.
And if you look at how much we owe, it's right at $37 trillion. We are responsible for paying that down. Our tax bill, the money that we pay in taxes, will be the source that the federal government uses, to pay down their debt at some point in the future. My bet is that tax rate will be higher later than it is right now. So if you're saving money in pre-tax savings accounts, now again, let me quantify this. If you're in a super high tax bracket, let's run the numbers first. But if you're, say, in a 12% tax bracket, just to make it simple, you probably should be saving in the Roth 401k version of your retirement plan, because you're saving at a very low tax rate. Go ahead and pay it now. And then when you take it out later, guess what? In general terms, you're not going to pay any income taxes on the part that you saved and the part that you accumulated. You might have to pay on your match, but nonetheless, getting more into the tax-free bucket will do nothing but help you later, with the quantifier that, if you're in a high tax bracket now, we may have to take a hard look at that.
Thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you have any questions about what we've discussed, remember, you can get a complimentary financial review with the team at Maestro Wealth Advisors by calling 336-448-1086 or go online to howmoneyworksradio.com for other great resources and ways to reach the team. You can also check the show notes of today's episode for our contact information as well. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app so you never miss an episode. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and all the most popular apps. For Craig and Jennifer Moser, I'm Mark Killian. We'll talk to you next time on the How Money Works podcast.
Craig Moser is a financial advisor and certified financial planner. Securities offered through Avantax Investment Services, member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Avantax Advisory Services. Insurance services offered through Avantax Affiliated Insurance Agency.